Hi, we're going to talk about discipline. Now, discipline is something that we all want for our kids. It's something that we know we need to do. It's something that is helpful and beneficial for our kids in the long term. And I also know that discipline can sometimes create a lot of conflict within us and also in our homes. Now, what do we want out of discipline? Or what are we looking at as a result of discipline? And here are 5 points, yeah? One is we want them to be able to know right from wrong. The second is to be aware of their mistake. Third is to be able to take responsibility for their mistake. Fourth is to make a choice to not do it again. And fifthly, to remember to do it differently, which is more appropriate, or which is a more acceptable way of doing the same thing. Now, how do we bring about discipline? That's another question. There's broadly two ways in which we discipline our kids. One is punishment, and that's usually out of anger, or comes from a place of rage. And the second one is correction. Correction comes from a place of calm. Now, what does punishment include? Punishment is usually, like a threat. It's mostly when we're reactive, yeah? We end up belittling our kids, or, we try to induce guilt. And these are, you can kind of observe these things very clearly in the words we use at that time. And not just do we target the action, or what the child did, we also end up targeting the child itself. Yeah, and the message that we end up giving our child is not only the fact that what he did or the action was wrong, but also the fact that the child itself, or child himself, is not good enough. Now, if we're really honest with ourselves, we'll realize that it's more like a personal assault. We also end up losing connection. We when we are angry, when we're reactive, there's a sense of loss for the child. The child knows that you're not really with the child in that moment. Yeah, you're operating from somewhere far away, from a position of power, from a position of authority, and the child does feel very obviously disengaged from you in that moment, and so do you. Yeah, and if you go back to the 5 pointers that I used about discipline, punishment only kind of touches upon two, which is they'll know they did something wrong, and two, they'll try not to do it again out of fear. So punishment might not then be the most appropriate way in which to discipline. The other way in which we discipline is through correction. Now, correction comes from a place of calm. It comes from a place of connection. You're still connected to the child. You're more inclined to penalize the action rather than penalizing the child himself. And correction has two parts. One is consequence, and the second is direction. Now, given the situation, or given the behavior, sometimes you just need to use a consequence. Sometimes you do need to gently guide them or direct them into what they should have done, or what they could have done. Sometimes you need to do both. Yeah. Correction is also not impulsive. Your child knows when you've thought through something, or when you're just reacting. Like, for example, when you threaten to kind of kick him out of the house, and you might say that in different words, in more milder words, but if that's the implication of what you said, of course it's going to freak the child out, but the child will also be able to call your bluff on it, because you know, eventually he knows you haven't kicked him out. And two, even if you do kind of, you know, send him out, um, after some time you're going to call him in. So you know, that threat or that punishment in that respect was impulsive from your side, and over a period of time your child also knows that he doesn't really have to take that seriously. Correction, on the other hand, comes, you know, from a place where you've really thought it through. You've you know, you've it's not unrealistic in that sense. You know, it makes sense to the child. Punishment a lot of times does not make sense to the child, because what he did and the consequence in the form of punishment, or you know, is too, you know, it's too wide apart. There's too much of a gap between what he did and what you're giving as a punishment, so it doesn't kind of make sense to the child. Correction, on the other hand, in the form of consequence, it kind of makes sense to the child. You know, it's like a direct cause and effect, you know, of the child's action. Now also, you know, like I said, correction, if you go back to those 5 points, it kind of meets all those 5 points. Yeah, it's also a more positive way of disciplining your child. It also, in the longer term, equips your child. It equips your child to make that choice between right and wrong, to you know, build self-control, to and you're also role modeling how to handle conflicts, how to handle when situations are not really pleasing to them, you know, because they're noticing that you're not pleased with what they did and how you're trying to resolve that. So they kind of pick that up from you. So correction in the form of consequence and direction gives them a longer, you know, in the longer term, it's more beneficial, and it's more, you know, intrinsic, rather than, you know, when we use punishment, which is definitely more extrinsic, and therefore the motivation just lies in avoiding your anger, or avoiding the fear, or you know, staying away from the guilt that is created with punishment. So so yeah, so you know, ultimately, of course, the choice is ours. And I know that now that I've said all this, a lot of you might be sitting on your edge, or you know, sitting on the edge of your seat, or kind of, you know, bringing all those occasions into your mind where you've messed up, or you know, or you know, I could have done it differently. And so you know, I just want you to kind of breathe, and you know, just let you know that, you know, parenting isn't easy. And just like as parents we're responsible to teach our kids, parenting is also an invitation for us to learn as parents. And you know, all of us, including me, we're all learning. You know, we're all learning how to parent. And you know, fortunately, we have the ability to unlearn and try out different things, and learn different things. And the more consistent we are with it, the more aware we are of the choices that we have when we're parenting. And you know, makes it over time easier for us to use these tools, or to use these skills, and to become a better parent overall. So it's okay if you've messed up, you know, and it's okay if you mess up even after you've heard this. You know, it's important though to notice that you have messed up. And you know, when you have the time to kind of reflect on, okay, so you know, the next time this happens, what can I do differently? And to have that plan, to be prepared, can avoid us a lot of guilt later on. Because you know, when we have thought it through, when we know what exactly to do different, rather than just telling your head, okay, you know, I need to do it differently, when your brain has really been through that process of deciding how exactly to do it differently. Your mind has the ability to bring that back to you when you're put into that situation. So we all have the capacity to learn, we all have the capacity to do things differently. And so yeah, so I want to leave you with that hope. Don't get bogged down by how you have been doing it, or how you don't know how to do it. But with the hope that we're all learning, and all of us, including our children, are capable of learning and doing things differently. So thank you, bye from me.